Galaxy 666 by Pel Toro. Session 50.
Chapter 15. The captain of the ill-fated Space Greyhound moved off through the strange interior of the alien ship. He found himself confronted by a metallic grid, or grill, that barred further progress. Bronet began examining the metal grill from all angles. It was not formidably thick, but he knew that alloys, especially alloys of an unknown quality, which these appeared to be, could be very, very deceptive indeed. Half fearful of force fields or strange alien currents, he reached out a tentative hand and touched the grill. He was aware of a mild sensation, but not a very powerful one. He withdrew his fingers and looked at it. The pattern of the grill had tattooed itself onto the end of his fingers. He rubbed it vigorously on the side of his uniform trousers, and it disappeared. The spot that he had touched seemed to glow just a trifle. He touched it again. It was by no means hot, mildly warm perhaps, like a coil of wire through which a very slight current has passed. The second touch he accomplished with his thumb, and the same pattern was now there as had been on his fingertips. This too was rubbed off easily on his trousers. Whatever metal it was to which the grid owed its structure, it was something that was outside Bronet's previous experience. He took a couple of paces back and surveyed the glowing spot which his thumb had touched. Gradually the glow died out. It reminded him of some other process he had seen, speeded up. What was it? He was so deeply engrossed in thought that he lost track of time and where he was. The answer exploded inside his head in a shower of cerebral sparks. It looked like one of those medical video casts which were shown as part of elementary hygiene and anatomy programs. The way that little bit of metal had come off his thumb, the glow afterwards, and the gradual dying away of the glow bore marked resemblance to the healing of a cut. The skin is damaged. The damaged skin, the damaged tissue at once becomes the scene of rapid activity of the body to which it belongs, or the organism to which it belongs. If the glowing area represented some kind of scar tissue, which was gradually done away with as the metal grid healed itself, then the analogy was quite a strong one. But surely, argued Bronet, could metal be said to live in any sense at all? There was something frightening, something horribly frightening about the concept of living metal. Experienced galactic traveler that he was, seasoned voyager of the spaceways, itinerant of hyperspace and accustomed to many strangely non-human life forms, Captain Bronet of the late lamented Space Greyhound was still unable to adapt his highly adaptable mind to a concept of living metal. True, in some rather unusual corners of God's great universe, Bronet had encountered things whose fundamental biomolecule had been based on silica rather than carbon. There were worlds on which the colloids from which life had been generated had been very different from those archaic terrestrial colloids from which Earth-type life and nearly all other humanoid life, despite its independent generation, had sprung. Bronet moved around the edge of the metal grill. Short of going back, his only means of making progress was by going past it or going through it. If it was alive in some strange way, or if it was endowed with a kind of sensitivity that was closely akin to life, then to prod it in the way he had been doing would be to register some kind of awareness of pain or discomfiture in whatever kind of brain controlled the thing. He wondered what its functions were. It did not seem exceptionally strong, and yet he knew that the basic principle of spaceflight must apply to these aliens just as they did to humanoids or any other kind of space traveler. The first law of space was the correct calibration of the power-weight ratio. Nobody carted unnecessary ornamentation into space. So then what was this? If it was meant to shield something, it either owed its presence to its strength, which was obviously not the case, or its ability to transmit a warning. The second probability seemed far nearer the truth as far as Bronet could calculate. He wondered about mesh as fine as this, almost as fine as the gauzes which had covered meat safes on faraway Earth in the distant 20th century and before. Bronet thought about the strange aliens in conjunction with this thin wire mesh, this apparently living mesh. These creatures, with their variable pseudopods and their peculiar jelly-like bodies, might be capable of passing through quite small spaces, which would have been impossible for Earthmen, equipped with flesh, blood, and bones. Bronet knew that the living sponge could be passed through a fine sieve in such a way that all its individual cells were either separated completely or reduced to very small, isolated groups of 5 or 6 at most. When these cells were then thrown into a tank of seawater, the sponge would obligingly reassemble itself. If two sponges were passed through the same sieve, their cells mixed, and the resulting amalgam put into a tank of seawater, then two sponges would result on the other side, so to speak. Bronet wondered, though he knew it was only idle speculation, whether the aliens possessed the same strange power of passing through fine grids and meshes to reassemble themselves on the other side. If this was the case, then the grid, grill, or fine mesh before which he now stood might have one of several interesting functions. The mesh was so very fine that it might have been designed to prevent aliens from performing some sponge-like trick. Perhaps they had a limited ability. If they could pass through what a terrestrial builder of the 20th century would have called a pea-shingle sieve, then these minute reticulations would confound them. Perhaps there were different psychophysical castes and orders of seniority among the aliens. It might be that the other side of this mesh was out of bounds to some of the weird slug-like pseudopoded strange ones, but not to others. Bronet grinned to himself as he imagined the mesh as a kind of filter marked, "For senior officers only." Maybe only the captain was sufficiently decomposable to pass through these holes and out again. It might be a matter of the old adage about superior sensitivity of the nobility. There was an old Earth legend which was familiar to Bronet as an historian. It was a fairy story about the true princess whose royal lineage had been discerned because her tactile sensitivity was such that she had been aware of a small pea placed underneath many mattresses upon which she slept. If the aristocracy of the weird pseudopoded race had a comparative degree of sensitivity to that which nature had bestowed upon the princess in the fairy tale, then this ability of theirs in the field of super-decomposition would have meant that they alone could have gone into the officers' quarters. Perhaps only the captain?
Here ends Session 50.